Today, the Supreme Court is hearing a case involving an intellectually disabled man by the name of Freddie Lee Hall. He is set to be executed in the state of Florida. However, there are some protests about his execution because they feel that as a mentally challenged man, he should not be facing the death penalty. Now, in the late 1970s, he murdered a 21-year-old woman who was pregnant. She was 7 months pregnant. He was convicted, and he should be behind bars. But IQ tests indicate that he is intellectually disabled. In fact, he took 2 IQ tests. One of them, he scored a 71. The second one, he scored a 60. Now, in the state of Florida, if you are past the 70 mark, past that threshold, you are considered smart enough to face the death penalty. But again, he took 2 different IQ tests. One of them said he was 60, and another thing to keep into consideration is that there's a margin of error that's about 5 points. Okay, so it could be 66, it could be lower than that. You don't know because of that margin of error.
So I'm torn on this for a couple of reasons, right? First of all, to be clear, there's no question that he shouldn't get the death penalty because death penalty shouldn't exist anymore. Because whether it's him or not him, in this case, whether he's innocent or guilty, we do know that we've got people on death row who are innocent. We know that because of the Innocence Project, where they've found out dozens of people that were on death row that we were positive were guilty and we were set to execute were innocent. So when we're not entirely sure, we shouldn't kill them. So, but if you had the death penalty and it worked great and you were convinced this guy absolutely 100% had done those crimes, then I'm going to be a bad guy and say that I'm not overly persuaded by this argument, right? If it's a mentally challenged person who has no idea in the world what's happening around him, and it's like, like a situation like Lenny in Mice and Men, and he breaks the neck and doesn't realize he broke the neck, he does, etc. This guy, along with his the person who did the crime with him, raped a 7-month pregnant woman, murdered her brutally. And then when a cop came to investigate, they were able to disarm the cop and then kill the cop.
Yeah, so let me give you guys the full details of what he did and why he was convicted. So he and an accomplice were looking to do a robbery, so they needed a car in order to do that robbery. They saw this 21-year-old pregnant woman coming out of a convenience store. They followed her, they forced her into the car, and then they drove to a wooded area where he raped her, and then he shot her and then dragged her further into the forest where authorities later found her body. Then
there's a lot of planning going on for someone who's intellectually disabled.
Yeah, and it's important to mention these details because I'm a little split on whether or not he's considered intellectually disabled as well. Because after that, he and his accomplice went to a convenience store, and the clerk there thought that they were really questionable, so he called the authorities to come investigate. A cop showed up, and they were able to successfully disarm the cop and then shoot and kill him. So he was convicted on 2 murder charges.
Right.
And regardless of all of these facts, and regardless of what you think about his intellectual capabilities, I still don't agree with the death penalty, so he should serve life behind bars regardless of what his intellectual ability is. When the Supreme Court ruled that a state cannot legally execute someone if they are intellectually disabled, there was a little loophole there because they allowed states to determine what is considered intellectually disabled. So in the state of Florida, they decided on the 70-point IQ. And that doesn't make sense. So if they rule against the state of Florida in this case, it will set a precedent, and I think that it's an important precedent because it'll close that loophole.
I understand. So in the end, if they decide not to execute him because of their standard that he's below the threshold, I have no problem with that. In fact, I don't want the death penalty for the reasons I stated earlier. So it's going to be okay. And remember, it's not like you get the death penalty or you're released. You get life in prison. So, and that's pretty bad punishment, and I can live with that.